Eldoria, a city pulsing with life, its heart beat with the rhythm of commerce, its soul shimmered with artistic spirit. Above its bustling streets, grand towers pierced the sky, monuments to the ambition of its people. Among them, nestled in an emerald embrace, stood the Ashworth mansion, a beacon of wealth and privilege. Victor Ashworth, the master of this domain, a man who wanted nothing yet possessed everything. He was born into a dynasty of gold, a lineage of power. Victor was the envy of many, yet he found himself increasingly detached. The world viewed him through the prism of his riches. The grand halls of his mansion, once a source of pride, now felt like the walls of a gilded prison. Each step echoed with the emptiness he felt within. The portraits of his ancestors, gazing down upon him from their ornate frames, seemed to mock him with their knowing smiles. One evening, as the sun cast long shadows across the city, Victor found himself drawn to a dusty, forgotten corner of his library. Amidst the leather-bound volumes and antique globes, he discovered a collection of his grandfather's journals. He had always known his grandfather as a shrewd businessman, a titan of industry. But the words that spilled from the pages painted a different picture. His grandfather, in his twilight years, had embarked on a secret pilgrimage, shedding his wealth to experience the world through the eyes of the common man. He wrote of the hardships he faced, the kindness he received, and the profound lessons he learned.
These journals, they speak of a life so different from mine. A life of authenticity, of connection. I yearn for that. I crave to see the world with unfiltered eyes, to understand the human heart in its purest form.
The seed of an audacious plan took root in Victor's mind. He would shed the shackles of his wealth, embrace anonymity, and walk among his people as an equal. He would trade the silk for sackcloth, the caviar for crusts of bread. He would become a shadow, an observer, a student of humanity.
My heart pounds with a mix of trepidation and exhilaration. I know the path I am choosing will be fraught with challenges, but I am determined to see it through. I envision myself shedding my gilded skin, emerging anew, like a butterfly from its chrysalis.
The prospect of leaving behind the life he had always known filled him with a sense of liberation. He would be free from the expectations, the obligations, the suffocating weight of his inheritance. For the first time in his life, he felt a sense of control, a sense of purpose that transcended the pursuit of wealth and status.
True wealth lies not in the vaults of banks, but in the richness of human experience. I yearn to discover the world through the eyes of those who have nothing but their resilience, their compassion, and their indomitable spirit.
Victor meticulously laid out his plan. He confided in his trusted valet, Alfred. Alfred, with his knowing eyes, had seen the world. He entrusted Alfred with the estate's management. Victor had to disappear completely, severing all ties. As the night deepened, Victor stood at the edge of his estate. He gazed back at the mansion, its windows glowing. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the journey ahead. The transformation began in the dead of night. The grand bedroom, usually a sanctuary of luxury, became a stage for Victor's metamorphosis. He carefully folded away his finely tailored suits, each stitch a testament to his wealth, and donned the coarse fabric of a working man.
His reflection in the silver-backed mirror startled him. Gone was the impeccably groomed gentleman, replaced by a stranger with calloused hands and a weary gaze. Yet beneath the disguise, Victor felt a surge of exhilaration. He was shedding not just his clothes, but the weight of expectation that had burdened him for so long.
He opened his safe, the air thick with the metallic scent of wealth. Rows of gold coins gleamed under the soft lamplight, but Victor's gaze lingered on a simple, worn leather pouch. It had belonged to his grandfather, a tangible link to the man who had inspired this audacious journey.
He filled the pouch with only what he deemed essential: a few silver coins, a change of clothes, and his grandfather's journals. These were his true treasures now, more valuable than all the gold in Eldoria, for they held the promise of self-discovery and a deeper understanding of the human heart.
Alfred entered, his weathered face etched with concern. He carried a tray laden with Victor's usual breakfast, a silver coffee pot, warm croissants, and a selection of jams in crystal dishes. Victor met his gaze, a silent plea for understanding in his eyes.
Alfred, my friend, the time has come for me to embark on a journey of self-discovery. I must shed the trappings of wealth and experience the world through the eyes of my people.
Alfred listened intently, his expression unreadable. He had served Victor's family for decades, witnessing firsthand the burdens of wealth and the loneliness it often brought. He had also read the grandfather's journals, sensing the profound impact they had on Victor.
When Victor finished, Alfred simply nodded, his silence speaking volumes. He knew better than to question his master's resolve. He had always suspected that beneath Victor's privileged exterior beat the heart of a man yearning for something more.
A chill wind whipped through the streets of Eldoria as Victor, his face obscured by a worn hood, stepped out into the pre-dawn darkness. The city, usually bustling with activity, was eerily quiet at this hour, its citizens still slumbering, oblivious to his clandestine departure.
He walked with a newfound purpose, his senses heightened. The familiar scent of freshly baked bread from a nearby bakery, the rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the distant laughter of children playing. These everyday sounds now held a new significance. He was no longer merely an observer, but a participant in the symphony of life that unfolded around him.
He made his way towards the poorer districts of Eldoria, places he had only glimpsed from the confines of his carriage. The grand avenues gave way to narrow, cobbled streets, the air thick with the smells of smoke, sweat, and industry.
He passed by dilapidated buildings, their facades crumbling, their windows boarded up. He saw ragged children huddled together for warmth, their faces etched with a weariness that belied their young years. And for the first time, Victor truly understood the chasm that separated his world from theirs.
As he ventured deeper into the heart of the city, Victor couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He turned a corner, his heart pounding in his chest, but the street was deserted. Had it been his imagination? Or were the whispers of his former life already on his trail?
He ducked into a dimly lit tavern, seeking refuge from the watchful eyes he imagined were following him. The air was thick with the smell of stale ale and sweat. Rough-looking men huddled around rickety tables, their voices loud and boisterous. A lone figure sat hunched over a mug in the corner, his face obscured by a tattered hat.
Victor took a seat at the bar, feeling a strange sense of comfort in the anonymity of the crowd. He ordered a mug of ale, the bitter liquid a far cry from the fine wines he was accustomed to. But there was a certain rawness, a certain honesty to the experience that he found strangely appealing.
As he sat there, listening to the snippets of conversation swirling around him, he couldn't help but think of his friends, his acquaintances, the people who filled his grand ballroom every week. What would they think, he wondered, if they could see him now? Would they recognize him beneath his disguise? Or had he already become a ghost, a figment of his former life?
The rusty mug. The name itself conjured images of chipped tankards and rowdy patrons. Victor, clutching his grandfather's worn leather pouch, hesitantly entered the establishment. The air hung heavy with the scent of stale ale, sweat, and something vaguely reminiscent of burnt onions. It wasn't unpleasant, merely different.
A gruff-looking man, his face a roadmap of hard living, wiped down a chipped mug behind a scarred wooden bar. He eyed Victor with a mixture of suspicion and indifference. "Looking for something, friend?" he rasped, his voice roughened by years of cheap spirits and shouting over tavern brawls.
"A room," Victor replied, his voice unaccustomedly soft. He cleared his throat, trying to sound more confident, and perhaps some information. "I'm new to Eldoria, and..." He trailed off, realizing the absurdity of his fabricated tale within these walls. No one here cared for stories from far-off lands.
The barkeep grunted, the ghost of a smirk playing on his lips. He must have seen countless lost souls like Victor wander through his doors. Rooms a silver a night up front. Information costs extra, depending on what you're looking for. He gestured towards a rickety set of stairs leading to the rooms above. Second on the right. Try not to attract too much attention to yourself.
The room was as basic as he expected. A lumpy straw mattress, a rickety chair, and a single cobweb-draped window that offered a less than inspiring view of the alley below. Yet there was a curious sense of liberation in its stark simplicity.
The sounds of the city, usually muted by his luxurious surroundings, now filled his ears. The rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the shouts of street vendors hawking their wares, the laughter and arguments of families crammed into cramped apartments. It was the symphony of everyday life, a concerto of human struggle and resilience.
One evening, as the sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the city, Victor found himself drawn to a small bakery tucked away in a quiet corner of the marketplace. The aroma of freshly baked bread wafted out into the street. He entered the bakery, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. An old woman stood behind the counter, her hands kneading a mound of dough.
"Can I help you, son?"
she asked, her voice surprisingly gentle. "A loaf of bread, please." She gestured towards a small wooden table tucked away in the corner.
"Of course, son, of course."
As the days turned into weeks, Victor settled into a routine. He woke before dawn, the sounds of the city already stirring around him. He would spend his days exploring the poorer districts, observing the lives of the people he now lived among. He found work where he could, carrying burdens for merchants, cleaning stables. He listened to their stories, their tales of hardship and resilience. He witnessed acts of incredible kindness, a neighbor sharing their meager meal, a cobbler mending a child's worn-out shoes for free, a group of women pooling their resources to help a sick friend. He saw firsthand the strength of the human spirit, the ability to find joy and hope even in the darkest of times. One evening, as he sat in the rusty mug, he overheard a conversation that chilled him to the bone. Two men were discussing a recent robbery. A wealthy merchant had been attacked, his purse and jewels stolen.
"They say the thief was a young man. Desperate times, I suppose, but stealing from one of our own."
One of them said, his voice a low growl. He shook his head, his expression a mixture of anger and disgust. The weight of the stolen coins pressed heavily on Victor's mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that his presence in this world was a betrayal.
I found myself seated next to a carpenter, judging by the calloused hands and sawdust. The man, Thomas, had a kind face etched with lines of hard work.
It's about the work itself, the pride in a job well done, knowing you've made something that brings comfort or joy.
As the days turned into weeks, Victor found himself seeking out Thomas's company more and more often. He would offer to lend a hand at Thomas's workshop, fetching lumber, sanding wood, performing any task that would allow him to be close to the carpenter and his quiet wisdom.
At first, I was hesitant, sensing Victor's inexperience with manual labor. But I soon recognized the genuine desire to learn in his eyes, the willingness to shed the last vestiges of his privileged upbringing and embrace the honest toil of a working man.
They worked side by side, their shared labor forging a bond of friendship that transcended their vastly different backgrounds. They shared stories, jokes, and the occasional mug of ale as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the workshop floor. Victor's hands, once accustomed to the soft touch of silk and velvet, grew calloused and strong.
I learned the satisfaction of transforming raw materials into something useful, something beautiful. I discovered a talent for carpentry I hadn't known I possessed. A talent that had been lying dormant beneath the weight of my inherited wealth. For the first time in my life, I felt truly connected to the world around me, a vital part of the tapestry of human endeavor.
One afternoon, as they were finishing work on a particularly intricate piece of furniture, Thomas received word that his wife had fallen ill. A wave of worry washed over his face.
Without hesitation, I offered to help. I accompanied Thomas to their small, cramped apartment. The air inside was thick with the scent of sickness and worry. Mary lay in their bed, her face pale and drawn.
Victor discreetly slipped a few silver coins to Thomas. Mary's illness, though a cause for great concern, proved to be a turning point in Victor's journey. He had come to Eldoria seeking to understand the true meaning of wealth. He realized it had everything to do with the richness of one's heart.
I continued to work alongside Thomas, finding solace and purpose in our shared labor. I spent my evenings at the Rusty Mug, sharing stories and laughter. I had started to feel a sense of belonging in this community.
He had traded his fine clothes for rough-spun wool and his silver cutlery for wooden spoons. He discovered a depth and richness to life that had always eluded him. Weeks melted into months. Victor's days were filled with the rhythmic rasp of the saw, the satisfying thud of hammer against nail, the scent of freshly cut timber permeating his clothes. He'd traded the gilded cage for a world of honest toil, and he found himself thriving in the simplicity of it all.
Yet a shadow lingered at the edges of my newfound contentment, the burden of my secret. I had grown close to Thomas, sharing meals at his humble table. He imagined the shock on Thomas's face, the betrayal in his eyes. The thought filled him with a sense of dread, a knot of anxiety tightening in his chest.
One particularly crisp evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops of Eldoria, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Victor found himself standing with Thomas outside the carpenter's workshop. The day's work was done, the tools put away, the air filled with the promise of rest and the comforting aroma of Mary's cooking wafting from a nearby window.
You know, Victor, you're not like the others. You carry yourself differently, think differently. There's a sadness in you, a longing that speaks of a different life lived.
Victor's heart skipped a beat. He'd known this moment was coming, had been dreading it for weeks, yet now that it was here, a strange sense of relief washed over him.
Thomas, there's something I need to tell you, something important, something difficult.
He hesitated, unsure how to proceed, how to condense the complexities of his past life, his true identity, into words that wouldn't shatter the fragile trust they'd built.
They found themselves seated on a couple of upturned crates outside the workshop, the last rays of sunlight fading fast. My heart pounding in my chest, I began to speak. I spoke of a life of privilege and isolation, of gilded cages and hollow laughter. I spoke of my grandfather's journals, the transformative power of their words, the yearning they ignited within me to experience the world beyond the confines of my inherited wealth. I spoke of my decision to shed my former life, to embrace anonymity, to learn the true meaning of wealth from those who possess nothing but their resilience, their compassion, their indomitable spirit. I spoke of my fear of losing your friendship, Thomas, the one true connection I'd forged in this new life I'd chosen.
As Victor spoke, the last vestiges of sunlight faded, plunging the world around them into darkness. The only light now came from the flickering oil lamp hanging above the workshop door, casting long, dancing shadows on the cobblestones. Victor's voice cracked with emotion, the weight of his secret lifting with each word spoken.
He watched Thomas's face, searching for a flicker of anger, a hint of betrayal. But there was none. Only a quiet understanding, a depth of compassion that took his breath away. When he finally fell silent, the silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken emotions.
Victor, I'll admit, I suspected something like this. The way you carry yourself, the things you say, the questions you ask, it all pointed to a life lived differently.
Thomas reached out, placing a calloused hand on Victor's arm.
What matters, my friend, is the man you choose to be.
A wave of relief washed over Victor. He realized he'd been granted a rare gift, the gift of unconditional friendship. The weight lifted, not entirely gone, but bearable now, shared. Victor found a new freedom in his work, his laughter with Thomas, the easy camaraderie of the rusty mug. He felt more present, more himself than he ever had within the confines of his former life. Yet as the weeks drifted by, a subtle shift occurred within him. A quiet yearning began to stir, a call not of duty, but of purpose. I'd come to Eldoria seeking the truth, and I'd found it in everyday acts of kindness, resilience, and love. I'd learned the value of honest labor, the importance of community, the transformative power of genuine connection. The lessons I'd learned whispered of a new responsibility, a need to bridge the chasm between the world I'd left behind and the one I'd come to embrace. He thought of his vast wealth, the power it represented, the good it could do if channeled wisely. He thought of Thomas, Mary, the countless others he'd met whose lives were a constant struggle against poverty, illness, and despair. He could no longer stand idly by, content with his own enlightenment while others suffered. The call of Eldoria, not just as a place to observe, but as a place to serve, resonated within him, growing stronger with each passing day. The thought of returning to my former life, to the opulent mansion and the world of privilege it represented, filled me with a mixture of trepidation and resolve. I knew my journey wasn't over, not by a long shot. I'd glimpsed a better world, a world where compassion triumphed over greed, where community outweighed personal gain, and I was determined to play my part in bringing that vision to life. He found Thomas in his workshop, sunlight filtering through the open doorway, dancing on the shavings that littered the floor.
Thomas, I've been doing a lot of thinking. My time here among you, it's changed me. Opened my eyes to things I never knew existed, to truths I'd been blind to.
Thomas, wise as ever, simply nodded, his gaze steady and understanding.
I've learned more these past months than I have in a lifetime. I've seen the strength of community, the power of shared purpose, the importance of simply caring for one another. I can't go back to pretending it doesn't exist, to living in a world where those lessons hold no value.
Victor's words hung in the air between them, a promise, a challenge, a call to action. He spoke of his desire to use his wealth not to buy influence or accumulate more possessions, but to uplift the downtrodden, to empower the forgotten, to create opportunities where none existed before.
It won't be easy. The powerful, they cling to their wealth, their influence. They won't surrender it willingly. There will be those who oppose you, who see your vision as a threat to their own comfortable existence.
I know, but I'm not afraid of a fight. Not anymore. Not when there's so much at stake. I need your help, Thomas. You've shown me the heart of this city, taught me the true meaning of community. Guide me. Help me build a better future for all of us.
Word of Victor's return spread through Eldoria like wildfire. At first it was met with disbelief. but whispers turned to conversations about Victor's generosity and concern for the less fortunate. A sense of cautious optimism began to bloom. Could he truly be different? Could he bridge the gap between the haves and the have-nots? Yet, among the elite, fear took root, fear of change and disruption. They dismissed Victor's ideals as naive whims. Suspicion grew in the grand halls. Whispers of discontent grew louder. Victor was now seen as a threat, and in their fear they vowed to resist him. Lord Cedric Beaumont adjusted his cravat, the fine silk cool against his skin. He stood before a gilded mirror, his reflection a study in aristocratic disdain. The annual grand ball felt different this year. Gone was the easy banter, the carefree laughter. Whispers of Victor Ashworth's return fueled a palpable tension. Cedric had known Victor since childhood, once considering him a friend. Victor's sudden embrace of the common man struck Cedric as dangerous. He'd scoffed at the initial rumours, but as schools and hospitals rose in poorer districts, dread settled in. This was a deliberate dismantling of their way of life. Cedric saw the same fear in his peers' eyes. In that shared fear, Cedric sensed an opportunity to unite against Victor. Later that evening, as the grand ball wound down, Cedric found himself in deep conversation with Eldoria's elite. They gathered in a secluded alcove, their voices hushed, conspiratorial.
This is madness. Ashworth's actions are an affront to our way of life. He's disrupting the natural order.
Eleanor viewed Victor's fortune as a stepping stone to greater influence. His philanthropy threatened her social aspirations.
If Ashworth continues, he'll bankrupt us all.
Cedric allowed a sly smile to play on his lips. This was the reaction he'd hoped for: fear, resentment, and self-preservation.
We need to act and act decisively. Ashworth may have fooled the commoners, but we know better. He's not a savior, he's a threat.
He paused, letting the gravity of his words sink in. He needed to paint Victor as a dangerous revolutionary.
Ashworth is beloved by the people. To move against him openly would be disastrous.
Victor's popularity was undeniable. They needed a more subtle weapon, a poison to erode his reputation.
We'll use his own generosity against him. We'll spread rumors, whisper lies, plant seeds of discontent. We'll make them see his charity as a smokescreen, and when their faith crumbles, so too will his empire of lies.
The seeds of doubt, once planted, took root quickly, fueled by fear and whispered lies. Rumors of Victor's treachery spread through the taverns and marketplaces.
It was said that the schools and hospitals he funded were tax shelters, that the materials were substandard, and the workers exploited.
Tales circulated of Victor's hidden wealth and shady investments. The very people who celebrated his return now eyed him with suspicion.
Cedric and his cohorts fanned the flames of discontent. They bribed officials and planted fabricated evidence.
The stage was set, the trap carefully laid. Victor Ashworth, once hailed as a savior, now found himself painted as a villain. The grand hall of the Eldoria courthouse buzzed with anticipation. Not since the trial of the Silk Road bandit had the city witnessed such a spectacle. At stake was the very soul of Eldoria.
Victor Ashworth stood accused of crimes against the people he sought to uplift. Charges of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy struck at his credibility. Each accusation was met with murmurs of disapproval.
Cedric Beaumont played his part to perfection. He spoke of betrayal and Victor's scheme to enrich himself. He painted Victor as driven by greed, not altruism.
Victor listened intently, his demeanor unwavering. He'd steeled himself for the backlash against his vision for Eldoria.
The prosecution called forth a string of witnesses, each carefully chosen to erode Victor's credibility. Merchants spoke of unfair competition, driving them to the brink of ruin. Landowners accused him of devaluing their properties by building schools and hospitals in poorer districts.
Even former beneficiaries testified, their tales of hardship and betrayal rehearsed. A mother claimed Victor's hospital worsened her child's illness.
Victor, watching the proceedings, felt despair. He recognized the tactics, half-truths, fabrications, appeals to fear. Seeing those he helped turned against him filled him with sadness.
He longed to denounce the lies, but knew it would play into their hands. He had to remain calm, trusting the truth would surface.
As the trial dragged on, a palpable tension settled over Eldoria. The city, once united in its cautious optimism, now found itself bitterly divided. In the taverns and marketplaces, arguments flared over tankards of ale and stalls of wilting vegetables.
Those who believed in my vision found themselves on the defensive. They spoke of my generosity and compassion.
The elite, sensing their advantage, pressed their attack relentlessly. They controlled the newspapers, denouncing Victor as a charlatan.
Eldoria, once a beacon of hope, now teeters on the precipice of chaos.
Section 4. The Seeds of Truth. The courtroom held its breath as the foreman rose to deliver the verdict. The air crackled with tension, silence pressing down on Victor's chest. Weeks of accusations had worn him down.
I placed my faith in the inherent goodness of humanity.
As the foreman cleared his throat, doubt crept into Victor's heart. Had the lies poisoned public opinion beyond repair?
Victor is a man of integrity and compassion. He is not the caricature painted by his accusers.
As Thomas spoke, a subtle shift occurred within the courtroom. The seeds of doubt began to give way to hope. Section 1. A ripple of change. Thomas's words resonated through the courtroom, their impact amplified by his character and reputation. Heads turned, whispers rippled, doubts wavered, replaced by a glimmer of hope.
Victor's kindness and genuine interest in others touched many lives.
One by one, others found their voices. Each story added to the growing chorus of support. The judge, known for his impartiality, was moved by the support. Section 2. The legacy of a transformed heart. The jury, initially swayed by the prosecution's narrative, now found themselves deeply conflicted. They'd heard the heartfelt pleas of those who knew him best, who'd seen firsthand his transformation. Finally, as dawn broke over Eldoria, they reached a verdict. The words "not guilty" echoed through the silent courtroom, met with stunned silence, then a collective gasp. The crowd erupted in cheers, a spontaneous outpouring of joy and celebration. Section 3. True Wealth. The trial of Victor Ashworth became a turning point in Eldoria's history. The elite, their power shaken, retreated into the shadows. The common folk embraced Victor's vision with renewed fervor.
True to my word, I continued to work tirelessly to improve lives. I poured my wealth into building schools and hospitals.
He reformed the city council to represent all citizens. He led by example, living modestly and treating everyone with respect. Victor discovered the transformative power of compassion and community. His legacy, etched in the hearts of a grateful city, served as a beacon of